Today you will be learning about Andrew Jackson, the election and administration. Some vocabulary to know that we will use throughout this lesson. Favorite sons. These are candidates backed by their home state. For example, Harry Truman would be a favorite son of Missouri because this was his home state. Plurality means the largest share. Similar to how in English you talk about plural words, this means multiple of something. This is the largest share of a group of things. In this instance, it'll relate to votes or the electorate. Mudslinging attempts to ruin an opponent's reputation with insults. So like throwing mud on their name, trying to dirty it. Some big questions that we're going to try to answer today. Number 1, how did Andrew Jackson's election change who could vote? Number 2, what precedent did Jackson set? A precedent means something that is going to be normal moving forward. Number 3, how did tariffs affect different regions of the U.S.? We'll talk about what tariffs are later on. Go ahead and pause this video and write these 3 questions down on a sheet of paper to answer as we learn today. The election of 1824. The Democratic Republicans were the only political party during the election. Today in the United States, we're used to having 2 major political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. In 1824, things were a little bit different, which I know can be a little bit confusing. But for the time period, there only existed Democratic Republicans. So only one party was running in this election, and supporters were split between 4 candidates. 3 of them were favorite sons, meaning that they were backed by their home state. On your paper, make a graph of the favorite sons. In the first column, you will have Henry Clay. In the second column, you will have John Quincy Adams. And in the third column, you'll have the subject of our lesson today, Andrew Jackson. Go ahead and pause this video if you need a moment to write this in your notebook. Henry Clay. In the column about Henry Clay, please write down that he was Speaker of the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives is part of the legislative branch which makes laws. Being Speaker of the House of Representatives means that you're in a pretty big leadership position. He was from Kentucky, and he was from an upper-class family. Being from Kentucky, he had the support of Kentucky since he was a favorite son. John Quincy Adams. He was from Massachusetts. He was the son of President John Adams. And he was popular with Northern merchants. Do you think being the son of a president who had already served would be an advantage or disadvantage for John Quincy Adams? I think it could be both an advantage and disadvantage. An advantage would be that people were familiar with your name and people knew that you might have some experience like living in a political life. A disadvantage might be that if they disliked your father, who was president, they might hold like a grudge or hold some thoughts against you. So they might not even really be interested in your platform because they just remember you as someone that your dad was. So it could be both an advantage and disadvantage. Andrew Jackson. He was from Tennessee. He was considered the hero of the War of 1812. He was raised in poverty and claimed to speak for the people. If you'll remember back, some of our other people have not had a similar negative experience. And so growing up. And so Andrew Jackson was kind of seen as like a hero, like a man of the people. He came from nothing. He became a war hero through what many presume to be hard work and just a lot of effort. And he said that he was a man of the people. So, not being from a noble class, he said he knew what it was like for poor people, or he knew what it was like for the everyday man. And a lot of people liked that concept. Since there's only one party running and we have 4 different candidates, people are very split. And so when the election happens, no one held a majority of the votes. So kind of think of it this way. If we have 3 people running, they each get 100 votes evenly. So there's no clear winner. The House of Representatives voted to break the tie. The House chooses John Quincy Adams. So all of these people vote, like in the country, it's a tie and it goes to the House of Representatives. This is still true today. If there were to be a tie in the presidential election this year, this would follow the same protocol. Here are some things that Adams wanted. He wanted to improve roads and waterways. He wanted to build universities. He wanted to support scientific research. He named Henry Clay the Secretary of State. Jackson opposes and vows to run again. Go ahead and jot down Adams' proposals underneath the column that you have for him. And I want you to kind of consider what we know about Andrew Jackson. Why would he maybe not like Adams' proposals? 2 things that really stand out for me is the building universities. Growing up at the time, you really only went to university if you had the money for it, or you got someone to sponsor you, or like a very special circumstance. Like would only be that the poor people would go to university. Today, we have scholarships and we have alternative opportunities, but not really at the time. So for Jackson to see someone who really wants to build up this thing that doesn't seem to benefit the poorer people, he's not going to really be a big fan of that. And supporting scientific research, again, at the time, science is really seen as kind of just the upper class type of hobbies or upper class type of interest. And so it just doesn't really seem to speak to the common people. And additionally, Jackson probably isn't going to be all that pumped about Henry Clay, one of the people he was running against, being named as Secretary of State because, he just sees more of the same and he wants to see a difference. And he doesn't really see that with Adams. So Adams is named president by the House of Representatives, and 4 years passes. Each president gets 4 years. And so we have the election of 1828. And so by 1828, most states expanded voting rights. Prior to 1828, only land-owning males, white males, could vote. And so if you owned land, that implied that you had some type of wealth. So while Adams was liked by the common man or the common person, if they didn't own land, they didn't get to vote anyway. So now in 1828, all white males could participate in politics. And these are Jackson's major supporters, the everyday average male. This results in an increase of voters. Now anyone who is a white male can vote. And a lot of that is Jackson's big base. I'd like you to make a T-chart on your paper titled The Election of 1828. And in the left-hand column have National Republicans, and in the right-hand column have Democrats. So in 1828, we see a little bit more of a divide into parties that kind of look similar to what we have today. You see the Republicans and the Democrats. Now, if you're at all familiar with politics or at all familiar with kind of the ideologies that exist for Republicans and Democrats, we don't really see a similar idea in 1828. Okay, so the beliefs that Democrats have today are not the beliefs that Democrats have in 1828. Those have changed over time. So just kind of keep that in mind. So national Republicans are very much for a stronger central government. That means they want more control in one place, like in Washington, D.C. They would like a new national bank, so control of the money, and they supported John Quincy Adams. So if John Quincy Adams is everything that Jackson doesn't like, you can probably infer that Jackson is not going to be a national Republican. So please pause this video if you need to write that in the column. Democrats want a stronger state government. They want states to be able to make their own decisions, and they want states to be under local control. They are advocates for agriculture and expanded suffrage. So, suffrage is the right to vote. So, we saw suffrage extend to white males, even if they don't own land. Who else might be what we call disenfranchised, so not being able to vote? Who else would be included in that category? That would pretty much include all women and anyone who wasn't white. So any minorities at the time in the United States, people would want to extend the right to vote to those groups as well. And the Democrats supported Andrew Jackson. Now, I say that women and minorities are included in the people who aren't granted the right to vote, and that would be the later suffrage. Minorities are not kind of towards the top of the list of people at this time of who they would like to extend the right to vote to. It's going to take a very long time, unfortunately, for people to kind of open up their minds to extending the right to vote to minorities. Some advantages that Jackson had. The Battle of New Orleans made Jackson a national hero. People knew his name. This is very similar to how George Washington got elected. He was a hero in the Revolutionary War, and people saw war heroes as really strong leaders. He defeated the Creek, which are a Native American tribe in the War of 1812. If you'll recall, some of the discussions we've had in class, how the relationship with Native Americans is not exactly a positive relationship. And so Jackson is seen as a hero for defeating the Creek Native Americans. And he claimed Spanish forts for America in the Seminole Wars. So he's seen as kind of a victor for America, as an American guy. And that's how he wants to be seen. He wants to be a man of the people. So the result, Adams won the North and Jackson won the West and the South. Despite mudslinging, calling names by both sides, Jackson wins. He names John Calhoun vice president. So on your piece of paper, if you just jot down this question, how did Andrew Jackson's election change who could vote? So some things that I think about is extending suffrage. I also think about the idea of someone who's not overly educated being president. So kind of more of a man of the people, kind of a poor representation, an average everyday man, kind of opening up the presidency in that way. Some precedents, so some new normals that Jackson left behind. He fought interest groups and was against bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is red tape. So I think about levels of government. So instead of just being able to fill out this one form and build whatever you want in your backyard, you kind of have to check with a couple different levels of people to make sure that that's okay. Are you compliant with local laws? Are you compliant with state laws? Are you compliant with your community's laws? So there's a lot of levels that you have to check with. And Jackson really didn't like that. He thought people should be able to kind of do what they wanted within reason. The spoils system, replacing government employees with a winner's supporters. So we have an election this year in 2020. It will be Trump, who is the incumbent, the returning president, versus whoever the Democrats appoint at this time. And so if Trump were to win, he would keep all of his people in the White House, all the people that he's chosen. But if Trump were to lose and a new person would come in, that new person would bring in all of their employees. So they would replace them with their people. And so Jackson kind of set that precedent. Nominating conventions, delegates and voters determine a single presidential candidate. So we don't have 4 people running all at once. And so on your paper, I'd like you to jot down this question: what precedents did Jackson